Welcome everyone to the 6th USP BRICS conference. Today we'll talk about cooperation in education, science, and culture. Thank you everyone to watch us, and we will start with our amazing professor, Maria Lagutina. She's PhD in political science and associate professor at the Department of International Politics at St. Petersburg University. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. Let me share my presentation. Do you see my presentation? Yeah, right?
We're seeing your screen, but not exactly the presentation. We're seeing the Zoom.
Sorry. I will try once again. Okay, and right now? Everything is okay. Okay, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to take part in your conference. It seems like it's fourth time when I participate in your group, in the work of your group and the activity, research activity of your BRICS group. It's my pleasure. And today I would like to present you pretty exotic topic for BRICS countries, I suppose, if we speak about the whole group, yeah. But anyway, exactly with your professors, the Professor Paolo, for example, Casella, we are working together on the development of this topic, BRICS countries and their interest and prospects of their cooperation in the Arctic and in polar regions as well. Today, I'm going to speak about prospects for BRICS scientific cooperation in the Arctic. I will try to pay more attention to this sphere of possible cooperation. And to be honest, I can say that today, mostly contacts and cooperation between BRICS countries in polar regions relates with exactly scientific cooperation. Well, let's start. Today, BRICS is intensively developing cooperation platform, and which makes it's important to develop some new agenda item for BRICS cooperation. And I and my colleagues, we believe that one such area may be the scientific interaction of the countries in the Arctic. BRICS countries, of course, represent a very unique case, very specific case for study for their Arctic presence and their Arctic strategies in the Arctic. They have different Arctic identities without any doubts. Among BRICS 5 countries, Russia is the only Arctic coastal nation. China calls itself like near Arctic state. India is a non-Arctic state. Yet it's situated in the northern hemisphere, while Brazil and South Africa are in different continents in the southern hemisphere. Well, the level of each of the BRICS countries' engagement in the Arctic affairs differs greatly. Meanwhile, discussing the Arctic issues in the BRICS cooperation, one should always bear in mind that there are two major features which all the BRICS countries share. You can see these two factors, these two reasons on the slide. Firstly, all of the BRICS countries are littoral states, which are highly dependent on the seas and are connected with each other through the Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and the Arctic Oceans as well. In a different degree, but they all are maritime powers, and this is very important. Secondly, all the BRICS countries are not newcomers in the polar domain. all of them have a long history of the involvement in the Antarctica, and the countries which are now seems like the newcomers in the Arctic, they are ready to share their experience of research, scientific research, which they got in the Antarctica exactly. Gradually, step by step, but the BRICS agenda is beginning to include issues related to polar research and the issues of ocean and Arctic exploration. And thus, at the end of October 2015, this process started to take place when an initiative of Russia, which held the BRICS presidency at that time, the BRICS organized an international conference called The Approaches of the BRICS Countries to Governing Common Spaces, Trends and Potential Cooperation. And in the framework of this conference, during this conference, where participants discussed issues of joint use of the oceans and both polars. In the Moscow Declaration, signed after the third BRICS Science, Technology and Innovation Ministerial Meeting on October 2015, the BRICS countries defined the guidelines for their collaborative research and development and outlined the new initiatives, among which they outlined the science and technology cooperation on oceans and polar regions. Today, it seems that, except for South Africa, the BRICS bloc is actively integrating into the Arctic policy that can create some preconditions for the Arctic direction within the BRICS agenda. I repeat once again, Russia is a great Arctic power. China and India have an observer status in the Arctic Council since 2013. That it means that they have some official status in Arctic affairs as well. And this opened a window of opportunity for them to closely cooperate with the Arctic nations in the Arctic issues. Very interesting case, Brazil, which appeals to its rich experience in Antarctica, also declared its interest in joining the Arctic cooperation last years. Next step in the development of oceans and polar agenda in the BRICS, it was the fourth BRICS Science and Technology and Innovation Ministerial Meeting in 2016, where the prospects of joint polar research by BRICS countries were also discussed at the final Jaipur Declaration, which noted an intent to organize the first meeting of the BRICS working group on joint ocean and polar research. And BRICS countries underlined that the ocean and polar science and technology are of utmost importance. Speaking about this working group, the key mission of this working group was defined as to promote cooperation between BRICS members countries in the field of ocean and polar science and enabling technologies through joint activities in order to generate new knowledge, train human capital, develop new technologies and applications, and improve public understanding of ocean and polar science. On this slide, you can see the list of all meetings of this working group since 2018. We've got 4 of them. It seems that in this year, this meeting was not organized already. At least I couldn't find any information about the results of this meeting. But anyway, we can make some conclusion from the agenda, from the topics. We can make the list of the key points which were discussed in the framework of these meetings, and the list of them you can see on the slide as well. And you see that it covers almost all possible direction of scientific and technological cooperation between our countries. There was a initiative to organize the so-called BRICS expeditions, and some of them took place already. Besides that, I would like to pay your attention to the idea to organize the cooperation within the framework of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, and some others initiative like the BRICS Deep Sea Resource International Research Center Foundation, etc., etc. Besides that, if we would like to discuss the results of the latest meeting of this working group, they created at their declaration, they make the list of the priority topics for collaborative research of BRICS countries. And this list you can see on the slide as well. This is about the deep sea research, of course, the climate and the consequences of climate changes. It's about oceanography, sorry, my pronunciation, marine disaster prevention and mitigation, joint observation, etc., etc., etc. The full list you can see on the slide as well. And at the end of my presentation, I would like to add several words about the prospects of intra-BRICS cooperation in the Arctic. Of course, here I will speak about cooperation of different BRICS countries with Russia, sorry, as a key player in the Arctic. Yeah, and of course, on the first place, I would like to put Russia and China cooperation in science in the Arctic. And one of the first projects of scientific cooperation academic cooperation between Russia and China in the field of Arctic research was the annual Sino-Russian academic seminar on Arctic cooperation, organized annually, alternately in Russia and China since 2012 by the Ocean University of China in Tsingtao and my university, St. Petersburg State University. And 1 week ago, we had the 11th meeting of this academic community. Today, it's still one of the few platforms of academic exchange on Arctic issues between Russia and China. And the list of discussed topics includes science and education, medicine, environmental protection, economic development, etc., etc. And some experts regard this format as a successful example of people-to-people diplomacy, not only science diplomacy, but people-to-people diplomacy. Today, at least 12 Chinese universities cooperate with Russian universities and research centers. Step by step, this cooperation is developed by our countries. On the whole, we can note that there is a positive trend in the development of cooperation between Russia and China in the field of Arctic scientific research. But Russia, unfortunately, not the key partner of China in scientific cooperation in the Arctic. Russia has much more scientific projects with the countries of Northern Europe, Finland, Norway, and some others. But step by step, we are developing together this direction in our bilateral cooperation. And it's obvious today, unfortunately, that the level of cooperation between our countries in scientific research is still insufficient. And although there are examples of some joint projects, most of them are still at the level of mutual agreements rather than at the implementation stage. Next case, Russia and India. Today we have strong interest to India as a partner of Russia in the Arctic. And India's research in the Arctic is mainly related to the climate agenda and the impact of current changes on the livelihood and economic activities of monsoon climate countries. Russia and India also have much in common in the focus of Arctic science scientific research. The capabilities of the two countries are mutually complementary, and I can call some areas which can be identified as the most potential in our bilateral cooperation. Joint work on Arctic research stations, joint work on expanding the fleet of ice-class polar research vessels, and creation and international scientific and educational platforms. And finally, Brazil. Brazil as well, in its turn, intends to pay greater attention to the development of scientific cooperation with the Arctic countries. And the key role in this direction is expected to take the Brazilian Academy of Science, as far as I know from my Brazilian partners. If we speak about relationships between Russia and Brazil and about Russo-Brazilian cooperation in science, Brazil is one of Russia's key partners in science and education in Latin America. And today, scientists and scholars from Russia and Brazil participate in joint projects to study the world's oceans and conduct polar research. And I could find one example of joint project between Russia and Brazil, which correlates with polar cooperation. This is joint scientific projects of Russia and Brazil, which is aimed at studying of the different scale, sorry, my pronunciation, physical and biochemical processes occurring in the zone of the world's largest river, Amazon, and comparing them with similar processes in the estuarine zones of major Arctic rivers, Ob, Yenisei, and Lena. Well, this is really prospective and really interesting case from my point of view. And to conclude, I can say that it seems that the ocean and polar issues become one of the areas of BRICS cooperation step by step. But I found in some publications pretty skeptical estimations of our cooperation and the prospects. But anyway, it seems like step by step developing. Yeah, and it's regarded mainly in the framework of scientific cooperation of BRICS countries. And such soft scientific approach gives a possibility of participation in this cooperation for the countries with different polar identities, without any doubts. Thank you for your attention. That's all.
Thank you very much, Professor. Really, thank you. She has to go now because she has a class, and we are really happy if you're here, but be free to go because your students are waiting. And well, we are talking about education, so let's do it.
Sorry for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Now I do invite Reon van der Merwe to talk. He is director for the stakeholder relations at South African BRICS Youth Association. That is a non-profit organization registered with the Department of Social Development in South Africa, with their vision of advance and promote global South cooperation and the leading voice of youth within BRICS and multilateral platforms. Its mission is to provide youth with the opportunity to meaningfully participate in BRICS relations from an African perspective and create a network of young experts to tackle challenges in making the world a better place. Furthermore, strengthening linkages, institutional cooperation, and people-to-people exchange within the BRICS and multilateral platforms. Thank you very much, Reon.
Thank you, Anna, and also thank you to all the other speakers who are here on this panel today. Thank you for inviting Sabia to be part of this conversation. We are, as you've mentioned, a youth organization that focuses on youth development using BRICS as a vehicle. And so this conversation about education and cultural cooperation aligns very closely with our own mandate and the work that we're trying to achieve. So very happy to be part of this conversation. As you've mentioned, just to give everyone some context, Sabia works, even though it is a BRICS-focused organization, it views the arena that it works in as the entire global South. And I think that underpins the comments that I'm going to make in this presentation. We then use BRICS as a vehicle to achieve our objectives. And then something that's very unique to us and that we value very highly is that we approach matters of global South cooperation from a Pan-African perspective. And that's always the perspective that we look into. and that informs our work. So I think my comments today, I would like to start by distinguishing between two things when we speak about education in the BRICS context. First, we're speaking about education in BRICS, as in physical education systems, the education of young people, the upskilling. And the second thing that we're talking about is education about BRICS. And so I'm going to start by making some brief comments about the first one, and then I'm going to link that up with the second one, education about BRICS. And that will be the main focus of the contribution that I'd like to make to our discussion today. So as we know, many of our societies within BRICS industrialized much later than the rest of the Western world, so to speak. Some earlier than others, but we know it was a more delayed process. For Russia, it was during the Soviet Union's time. For China, it was also during that time. South Africa started to industrialize in the 60s, same with India after decolonization and so forth. And I think the unique thing about this is that our societies are oftentimes structured different than those of our Western counterparts. And I think this relates directly to the challenges and the opportunities that education in our different countries face. One of the key things that has resulted from this is that many of our societies are still partially rural in nature. Even more developed nations like Russia and China still have a very strong rural component to their societies. And these rural, smaller towns, villages, play a key role in shaping not only the technical knowledge of the population, but the moral and the spiritual and the cultural identity of many of the people in these nations. And this, I think, is very unique when compared, for example, to your highly industrialized or highly modernized societies in the West. But it's also, in some sense, a strength on our part, because we have these roots that we draw from when it comes to our cultural identity. Myself, for example, living in South Africa, I was born and raised in a very small town, as compared to the big city that I live in now. And this had a direct impact in the way that I saw the world, the way I thought about other players and my place in society. And I think if you speak to the average young person in the BRICS world, they will have some linkage to the rural community that they come from. Either their family comes from there, they have family there, or they themselves might have come from there. And so that's the first point that I want to make, that when we have a conversation about education and cultural cooperation, we need to understand the unique diversity that the BRICS nations and all global South nations, for that matter, have, and that we need to start building from that platform and recognizing that diversity. The second point that I would then like to make is that BRICS as a vehicle is uniquely positioned to tap into that unique character of our different BRICS nations. Unlike, for example, the Western approach to education, which is monolithic and sees education as sort of a homogenizing tool to, get the population at the same standard or get everyone to think the same way. Because of course, here we're not just thinking about technical skills, we're also thinking about philosophies, we're thinking about approaches to life, we're thinking about ethics, spiritual practices, all these different things that form our cultural identity. We need to think of education as a more comprehensive approach to the human being. And so when we look at it that way, the BRICS nations offer a tool that can think much more broadly about us as human beings. For example, in South Africa, we have the concept of Ubuntu, which is taught from a very young age, not explicitly. No one sits down and says, look, this is the definition of Ubuntu, this is how you have to treat people. But the concept of Ubuntu, which means that I am because you are, which is a very communal way of thinking, is ingrained in the practices and ways that we live out our lives on a day-to-day basis. And so from a very young age, we are taught, it's a form of education, we are taught that this is the way that you relate to the world. Your extended family, your community are directly linked to you. You are not a radical individual that can just go off and into the world and do whatever they want. You have a unique responsibility to your community. There are variations of this philosophy, for example, in most global South nations that still have a strong link to traditional or rural communities. And that is really something that preceded industrialization, and I think today is still one of our biggest treasures. Linking that to the idea of education about BRICS. Now we know that the BRICS bloc has existed for almost 2 decades now, but in many ways it still remains a foreign concept and idea to the majority of people within BRICS nations, more so to young people. The average young person probably knows BRICS by name, but they don't really know what BRICS is, what it does, how it's supposed to help them, or how it feeds into their lives. And so there's really a niche in that regard for us to start thinking about how do we educate young people about BRICS. And here I don't just mean educating them about the countries that are in BRICS or how much GDP these countries have or how much population, not factual things, but in a sense, teaching them about the philosophy of BRICS, the way it approaches the world, the opportunities that it opens up to them, because naturally within the BRICS alliance, there have been many opportunities that have opened up in whether it be government, whether it be in business, civil society, all these different linkages being created all over the place, whether the average young person is educated on being able to identify these and also identify how those things can help them. I'm reminded of the fact that the BRICS Business Council, which has chapters in all the different BRICS nations, has a specific working group designated to skills development. And so this is a working group that in South Africa, Sabia has worked very closely with. And this group has looked specifically at how to upskill young people in South Africa and also all the BRICS nations with the intention of having them make use of these linkages that exist within BRICS. Because it's one thing, for example, to increase trade between the BRICS nations, to sign a trade agreement, and now there's more trade going on. It's a very different thing to take a young person, educate them in entrepreneurship, educate them in these systems, these trade agreements, and then show them how they can use that to better their lives. Because in the end, that's the point of education. It is to enhance the individual, it's to enhance the society and the communities in that society. And so if education isn't really achieving that, then there's sort of a lack. But to draw back to this idea of a need for a public education about BRICS, this is obviously not something that necessarily would come through traditional channels like a school curriculum. I mean, you could maybe in your social studies class include something about BRICS in your social studies curriculum, but that's not going to have the same impact. What we really need to do, and what we strive for at Sabia, is a participatory approach, making youth stakeholders of the BRICS and also including them in a way that they feel that they can participate. Because in the end, and I think this is true for most education philosophies, most people will tell you that the approach to education where you just sit and listen to a lecture is not a very good way of learning at all about anything in the world. The way we learn from very young is by doing, by participating, by touching, feeling, speaking, engaging, dialoguing. And so that same philosophy underpins, or should underpin, this public education about BRICS, the idea that you must become part of the conversation, and not in a way where we are telling you what BRICS is or what it can do for you, but where you discover and you actually become part of creating those channels. And so the way that Sabia has done this, and I want to mention briefly some of the projects we've engaged in and highlight how we believe they are embodying this philosophy and how we'd like to see this with our other stakeholders in BRICS, as we're already working with some of them, but with more of them embodying these kind of projects. So for example, in the last year, we have had our bilateral and multilateral forums, and these are essentially just forums where obviously now it's been online because of the pandemic, but hopefully soon we can have these in person and start inviting people to South Africa. But having young people come together in a space and to deliberate and discuss. There's a concept in South Africa which is called an imbizo, which is essentially a coming together of the community. And so when you have an imbizo, all the community members are invited and they all get to participate regardless of what their status, where they come from, and regardless of what, it's almost a primordial form of democracy that's existed in Southern Africa for a very long time. And so thinking of a forum as almost an imbizo, where young people from all different walks of life come together, you set the agenda, but they give content to it. And so these bilateral and multilateral forums have been very useful for that. And we've had a very participatory approach in them, you know, using breakaway rooms, using discussion rooms, facilitation. These are very important elements of design that go into our projects to make sure that it's not just young people sitting there and absorbing a lecture, for example. But at the same time, we do value the input of experts. And in these spaces, what we've tried to do is create that balance between the participant and the expert, usually having the expert give the foundation of a specific topic and then getting inputs from different participants. And so that's one of the examples. Another one, of course, which has evolved over time, which personally we hope to see gain more traction, is the idea of the BRICS school. So we know that Fudan University in China has been hosting a very successful BRICS summer school every year, bringing young people to China, having them participate, lectures. It's usually a multi-day event. The same in Russia. The National Research Council and the BRICS Universities Network have both hosted BRICS schools in Russia. And these are very unique spaces. They go beyond just, again, lecturing and listening to information. They are spaces for cultural exchange, for people to learn about Brazil, to learn about Russia, to learn about South Africa, China, and India, not as a sort of Wikipedia page that they just Google and see, oh, this is the flag, this is the president, this is the GDP, but that they actually can know people by name. They can put faces, experiences, and they can actually learn about how these people from this country that I don't know, that I've never been to, how they live, how they think, how they perceive the world, so that our ideas about both BRICS and the world are not influenced by others, but we have first-hand experience. And so Sabia is also hosting now in November our first BRICS school in South Africa. And so this is a project that we hope will link in with the BRICS schools that exist in other parts of the BRICS ecosystem, and that this will become a project for youth empowerment and a form of public education. And then, of course, innovation summits, entrepreneurship training, webinars, workshops, all of these things. It's less about the actual hour that we spend together, for example, in a space like this, and more the fact that a space like this exists and that we've actually created it and we've actually come together from different parts of the world. Regardless of what we say, the coming together itself has already created that unique space for education and learning among us. And in my closing remarks, what I want to highlight is that education and cultural cooperation in BRICS cannot just be a government-driven event or program. We cannot wait every 5 years when your country hosts BRICS, then we start to collaborate, then we start to cooperate. For a sustainable approach, we need to start creating ongoing projects and programs, as I know some of my colleagues here on the panel and their organizations are doing this as well. Sabia is also aiming to do this, so that there can be a continuous place for young people to go and learn about BRICS and become involved. And so that we can actually have a multi-stakeholder approach where, as the different stakeholders and interest players in the different BRICS countries, we can start from a grassroots and create that network of young people and youth organizations and development organizations that can create those spaces for young people, because it's a multi-stakeholder approach and it aligns very closely with the people-to-people tie and pillar of BRICS. And so this is what we're looking towards in 2023. Of course, South Africa is hosting BRICS in 2023. And we really hope that many of the colleagues watching, those who are also on this panel, and others who have been part of this amazing conference will join us as we celebrate BRICS in 2023 in South Africa through these projects and many others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reon. I would like to pass now for Kira Ivanova. She is coordinator of the Russia BRICS Project Office for International Youth Cooperation, member of the International Project Congress, and an international relations specialist in the Creative Technologies Foundation of the Ulyanovsky region in Russia. I will show your presentation now. Thank you very much for being here.
So good afternoon, dear friends. I'm very glad to be here today. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me here. So I think we can move straight to the third slide, please. Yeah, we can skip this one.
Okay.
Just the next one, yeah. So our Russia BRICS Project Office for International Youth Cooperation is based in the city of Ulyanovsk, Russia. It was founded by the Russian Federal Agency for Youth Affairs in September 2020, and since then, different projects designed to support and improve cross-cultural ties between young people from the BRICS countries are being conducted by our team. The goal of our project office is to unite the efforts of federal and regional government bodies, public organizations, the student community, in order to support the systemic interaction of young people and youth organizations in Russia and the BRICS countries. The basis of such interaction consists of projects on education and cultural exchanges. So we integrate a festival of cultures into each of our events, where we introduce participants to the traditions and mentality of other countries, and we also conduct various research, and you can easily take part in them. So next slide, please. So what are the main challenges the BRICS youth faces today? We definitely need to increase the number of informational channels for BRICS youth. We need to discuss the measures of state support for youth initiatives and to create a common youth platform for all BRICS countries. Next slide. So let me tell you a little about the major events and the priority plans of our project office. Next slide, please. As you know, 2020 was the year of Russia's BRICS chairmanship. Russia held lots of BRICS events that year, and so at the end of November 2020, Ulyanovsk hosted the 6th International Youth BRICS Summit and the meeting of youth ministers, where 90 participants from the BRICS countries living in Russia discussed the current situation and opportunities for the development of youth cooperation between the BRICS countries in a wide range of areas. It was the first large event of our project office. Next slide, please. One of our annual events is the International Youth Forum on Public Diplomacy, INTER-YES. In 2021, we had it for the first time in the city of Ulyanovsk, and this year we held it online. All in all, 160 participants from 15 countries of the world attended expert sessions, speech sessions, 4-day workshops on developing public diplomacy projects. The participants learned the basics of intercultural dialogue, project management, resource provision of projects, and developed 16 projects on public diplomacy for subsequent implementation and under the guidance of certified mentors. We also plan to hold INTER-YES 3.0 next year in our city of Ulyanovsk, and young leaders from the BRICS Plus countries are welcome to apply as soon as we announce this event. Next slide, please. In July 2021, the first meeting of the alumni of the Public Diplomacy Program meeting in Russia was held in Ulyanovsk. 42 young foreign leaders from 16 countries of the world have become the participants of this project. This program acquaints foreign participants with modern Russia, and this was the first time it was held not in Moscow or St. Petersburg, in order to show the participants smaller cities and acquaint them with the political and cultural structure of Russian regions. In May 2022, this event was held online, and we became the organizers of the session of an expert panel discussion dedicated to cooperation with the BRICS countries in the new realities. Next slide, please. In September 2021 and in August 2022, we had our international BRICS youth camps in the Ulyanovsk region. About 200 young participants from the BRICS countries shared their knowledge, experience, and learned new things about business, creative industries, volunteering, ecology, and sustainable development from 50 experts during 4 shifts. The purpose of the camp is to promote the further development of practice-oriented cooperation between young leaders and organizations of the BRICS countries. Next year, we plan to hold the camp as well, and this time its topic is going to be media. Next slide, please. In November 2021, we held the 7th Russian-Chinese Youth Forum Volga-Yanzi, where about 300 Russian and Chinese students and university teachers took part. Sessions were held on science and innovation, education, youth entrepreneurship, tourism, culture, and art. Next slide, please. At the end of March, we held the International Youth Volunteer Conference BRICS to You, which was held in a very welcome and friendly atmosphere. Its goal was to unite active young people of the BRICS Plus countries who are interested in volunteering, as well as to increase the level of their volunteer skills and understanding of the main cultural characteristics of the BRICS countries. As a result, more than 50 young people from 9 countries joined the international volunteer community, and the BRICS Volunteer Code was unanimously adopted. Next February, we are going to hold it again. So if you are interested in volunteering, you are more than welcome to take part in it as a speaker or as a listener. Next slide, please. In April, we had the first international art residency of creative industries in Ulyanovsk. Representatives of various creative industries such as fashion, graphic design, theater, cinema and animation, music, IT, graffiti came from 11 BRICS Plus countries to conduct master classes and present their products. The purpose of the project was to promote implementation of international youth creative projects and cultural exchange. Next slide, please. Now, from July till December, we are having the online creative cooperation program, UNESCO Creative Cities of the BRICS countries Art Together. The program consists of 6 online meetings of representatives of creative professions who live in the UNESCO Creative Cities of the BRICS countries. Ulyanovsk was the first Russian city to join the UNESCO Creative Cities network in 2015 as the City of Literature. And all in all, there are 41 UNESCO creative cities in the BRICS countries now, so this is a really interesting online traveling. This project gives people the opportunity not only to get acquainted, but also to take initiatives to invite peers and colleagues from the BRICS countries to their land. 223 people from 22 countries of the world have already taken part in it, in these online meetings, and our next 5th meeting is on November 15. I will send the link to the registration form in the Zoom chat if it's possible after my speech, so that you could apply in case of interest. Next slide, please. This is a project which we are going to hold next year. From February till July 2023, we are going to hold the international project of BRICS Youth Self-Identification, the BRICS Ornaments. It is a cultural and educational program dedicated to the theme Ornament as an ethnographic code of the nation of the BRICS countries. The participants of the BRICS countries will select the traditional ornaments of their countries, systematize them, present the history of origin, the specifics of the outlines and semantic roots. An exhibition representing the national historical ornaments of the BRICS countries will be created as a result. So we invite students from the BRICS countries to join the project and take part in creating the exhibition, which they will exhibit in their countries afterwards. Next slide, please. Since 2020, we've been taking part in different events on cooperation with the BRICS countries as participants, experts, partners, and co-organizers. Next slide, please. And I would like to say that today, in the era of global tension and instability, calmness and confidence in the future can be given by the understanding that the cultural values for the youth of all BRICS countries are unshakable and common. So I guess this is pretty much it. Each of you are very welcome to contact us, follow us on social nets, and share your thoughts on youth cooperation, because your ideas can really become the basis for new joint projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kira, for your sharing. I will stop the presentation now. If I do this, I'm not sure if I did, but I would like to invite now Sérgio Veloso dos Santos Jr., He is a professor of international relations at the Catholic University of Rio and research coordinator at the GEBRICS Policy Center. He holds a master's degree in transatlantic studies from the Jagiellonian University, Krakow, Poland, and a PhD in international relations from the Catholic University of Rio. Thank you very much, Professor.
Hello, you all. Can you all hear me? Yes? Okay, thank you all. I'd like to thank GEBRICS and Lagutina for the opportunity, and also to stress that the opinions and positions presented here are my own only, and all the institutions I work at. We are here to discuss cooperation among BRICS. As a researcher and research coordinator at the BRICS Policy Center since 2013, I participate in different seminars and panels concerning BRICS, mainly the academic and the civil BRICS forums. At these events, the debates were always about actual challenge and experience concerning how the BRICS might cooperate to improve themselves, but also how to foster development worldwide. When taking parts in these kind of seminars and panels, I have always seized the opportunities to stress that the BRICS is and has always been a beacon for hope and for a more prosperous and developed world. Together, throughout the years, and despite all the odds, we managed to find common ground and to find ways to cooperate and develop a common agenda of development and prosperity. Arising from this spirit, we created the New Development Bank, which, as it's stated by its mission, aims at building bridges the gap between needs and funding, and to be a partner in bringing about truly holistic development, as stated by its missions. Development, prosperity, inclusive growth, and enhancing the well-being for all, not only for us. This is what the BRICS is about. Over the last decade or so, the BRICS have become a knowledge-sharing platform, putting together not only our countries, but mostly creating synergy among us, the people of BRICS. Brazilians, Russians, Indians, Chinese, and South Africans got together to cooperate and to build a common path without the mediation of traditional Western powers. And this was truly innovative. Panels such as this one are expression of synergy among people from the BRICS. We learn how to cooperate among ourselves autonomously, enhancing our own agendas, not only within the framework of our country's agendas. But since the establishment of BRICS, a lot has changed. Brazil went through a coup and saw fascist movements arise and occupy key institutions, which I hope will be democratically defeated next Sunday. China has grown as a powerhouse, economically, politically, and militarily, establishing a fundamental asymmetry within all the BRICS. And this is a challenge that we need to face and we need to critically assess. The world of 2022 is a different world, that of the yesterday, with a crisis even bigger than the financial crisis of 2008 that gave birth to us. There is a new geopolitical order, and we need to face it and to understand what it means and what kind of challenges this new geopolitical order brings upon us. We can't go any further thinking about and discussing modes of cooperations until we face the fact that one of us is engaged in a brutal war against a sovereign country. The Russian warfare in Ukraine has changed everything, and there is no other issue more important to be addressed and corrected if we want the BRICS to remain relevant. If we truly want the BRICS to find new ways to cooperate and to enhance the well-being of people, we should fight for the well-being of people of the whole world, because the world is a whole. We should take the responsibility to dispute the whole world and to truly become a beacon for improving lives of everybody. We should build bridges, as the New Development Bank states, and not raise cities to the ground. I mean, how do we benefit from a fractured world? How can we seek to enhance and find new ways of cooperating when one of us is engaged in a war and threatening humanity with the use of nuclear weapons? How is it possible to keep with our business as usual seminars and panels without critically addressing the Russian aggression on Ukraine? Are we going to keep debating development and cooperation while ignoring the war in Ukraine, which lead us closer to a nuclear threat? Since the beginning of the war in February this year, this is the third seminar I participate. I find it very disturbing that the issue of the Russian war in Ukraine wasn't even put to be discussed in any of these seminars. How do we, people from BRICS, benefit by ignoring the huge white elephant, which is the war in Ukraine? We truly don't need the mediation of any Western power to develop ourselves, but do you want to bring back the old East-West divide of the Cold War? Is that the best framework for building a more prosperous life for our people and to enhance cooperation? Does that mean that American and Western imperialism should go uncriticized and untouched? Of course not. We definitely don't benefit from that as well. But do we need to take ourselves back to the era of unprovoked pre-45 type of war? Again, how do we benefit from that? Putin has justified the aggression by saying Ukraine is a Nazi country and therefore should be denazified. He has said that a lot of times. This is a dangerous argument because any argument that justifies the invasion of and destruction of a sovereign country by another sovereign country can be used to justify the invasion and destruction of any sovereign country. Fascism is as strong as ever in Brazil. We have a fascist president, which I hope will be defeated, and fascist movements all over the country. Does that mean that if any other country should invade us, justifying that invasion, saying that it's doing this to free us from fascism, we and the whole world should accept it? Shall we fall for euphemisms such as special military operation and denazification, accept the unprovoked Russian aggressions on Ukraine? The Russian warfare in Ukraine is not in our best interest. It does not enhance the well-being of people in BRICS and nowhere, because our well-being should never come at the expense of other people's well-being. We should not kill civilians to somehow annex territories. This has to be something from the past and not something that we do right now, right? I thought that we as the BRICS, we should be discussing development as we have been discussing throughout the last decades. But there's no way to keep discussing the things that we have been discussing throughout the last decades when one of us is engaged in a brutal war. This is the only problem we should be talking about. This is the problem the whole world is still talking about, because this is a problem that is leading us to a nuclear threat. So, as a citizen of a sovereign country, I stand against the Russian war effort in Ukraine, and I truly believe people from all BRICS countries should do the same, including our Russian friends here. BRICS will not remain relevant if we do not address this issue, which is an issue that threatens the whole humanity. It is an existential, the Russian warfare in Ukraine is an existential threat to all of us. A nuclear war, which might be coming, which might not be coming. We don't know if if Putin is bluffing or not. A nuclear war is an existential threat to all humanity. This war should stop. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing. And I would like to pass to questions. So I put the panel open for the public. And of course, if you want to make questions for each other, be free to. And we have already 2 questions. The first question is to Kira. just a minute. I lost the question, but now yes. Akira, Bolshoi Ballet has a school in Brazil, in Joinville, with great success in discovering big talents. Would that be a good initiative to the other BRICS countries, do you think?
So it's an event where we can find talents, or did I understand it right?
I think he asked if there is a part of the Bolshoi Ballet in
Ballet.
they have
Okay.
a ballet school in Brazil. So they're asking if it's a good.
Yeah, why not? We organize any kinds of cultural and educational events. So yeah, it would be a great idea.
Oh, culture is a product marketed, and it's a cheaper to mass produce. TV, movies, music that fit the same standard all over the world. How can we use diversity to counteract this? Or in other words, how can we make our own BRICS culture production more attractive than the standard culture mass produced? It's a everybody question.
Would you mind repeating the question?
Of course. Culture is a product, and it's cheaper to mass production. TV, movies, music. It's cheaper to make it in a mass relation that fit the same standard all over the world. So it's always a standard way to produce this. So the question is, how can we use diversity to counteract this? In other words, how can we make our own BRICS culture production more attractive to the people than the standard culture just already produced around the world?
I think I can take a shot at this. Just to clarify, it's how can we make our cultural production more attractive than the standard cultural production, like movies? So I'm assuming when we say that, we're referring to like Western ways. I think just to give a brief response to that, I think we need to recognize that cultural export is also a business. The reason that Western exports have been so successful in terms of cultural export is because they've turned it into a business. And essentially there's profit and there's resources there that their cultural industry can draw on. We've seen other countries do similar things, like for example, South Korea has very successfully exported the cultural phenomenon of K-pop and other cultural things. Japan has several cultural exports that they've managed to get onto the international sphere, and there are several other examples. I mean, we have Bollywood from India, we have Nollywood from Nigeria, which have all gained, Nollywood to some lesser extent, but have all gained traction. And I think it's really a matter of whether the domestic countries are willing to firstly invest in these cultural industries and see their value and promote young, I suppose they could be called cultural entrepreneurs, young people who are willing to use their talents in a way that portrays the values and the thought patterns of the country, and to give them an international platform. But at the same time, it's also whether the local community is willing to absorb those cultural exports. It can't just be that we export the culture, it must have a home within the country itself. So I'm thinking, for example, in China, even though they've modernized to a large extent, there are many Chinese young people who are now going back to traditional dress, traditional practices, and exploring these, and also investing in that economy, which helps that, there's a word for it that I can't remember now at this point, but reinvesting in traditional cultural elements of China, which again helps that industry to grow. So in the end, I think that's the comment I would make, that we have to recognize that culture is also not detached from economic resources.
Thank you, Reon. Kira, Sergio, do you like to respond to this question?
I think it depends on how we treat our own traditional culture in our country, right? So if we promote it in our country, I guess it will be very popular. It will become popular in inside of our country, and it will be it will come into the market, the mass market as well. So yeah.
Thank you very much. I will open if there is any other questions. I'm checking with my colleagues. Okay. I don't know if you wanted to make some points, Sergio, Kira, Reon. So I will finish this today. I will finish our panel, and I will really thank you for all of you watching us and all of you presenting here. Thank you very much in the name of GEBRICS and in my name. It's an honor to be here, really honor. And you are welcome to be with us in the next conferences. It's a tradition of GEBRICS, and I'm really happy to be here for this 60th time. And well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Obrigado.
Thank you.
Obrigado, Ana.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Ciao.